There is a moment, and almost every family eventually experiences it, when the power goes out and the house becomes very quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind where you hear your refrigerator stop humming and realize, maybe for the first time, how much of your daily comfort depends on electricity you never think about until it disappears. According to the Department of Energy, the average American experiences over 8 hours of power outages per year. But that average hides the truth. Because for millions of families during major weather events, grid failures, and infrastructure crises, outages can last days, sometimes longer. And the difference between a family that stays calm and a family that panics is almost never about courage. It is almost always about what they had stored before the lights went out. This video is a countdown. 10 things, 10 items that most households overlook, underestimate, or simply never think about until the moment they desperately need them. And here is what I want you to understand before we start. None of these items are exotic. None of them require special training or a bunker. Every single one of them can be purchased right now at a normal store for a normal price. The problem is not access. The problem is that most people wait until the crisis is already happening. And by then, the shelves have already told them the truth. So let's count down and pay attention, because the closer we get to number 1, the more you are going to feel something uncomfortable. Not fear. Clarity. Number 10 is something that almost no one keeps enough of, even though almost everyone has used it recently. It is aluminum foil. And before you skip ahead, give this 30 seconds. Because the way most people think about aluminum foil is completely wrong when it comes to emergencies. Aluminum foil has been in American kitchens since the 1940s. Most people treat it like a convenience item. Something to cover leftovers or line a baking pan. But in a power outage, aluminum foil becomes one of the most versatile tools in the house. You can cook over an open fire or a camp stove without pots by shaping the foil into a container. You can reflect heat and light. You can seal gaps in windows during extreme cold to retain warmth. You can wrap food to slow spoilage. You can even signal for help using reflected sunlight if you're in a situation where visibility matters. Here is the part most people miss. During Winter Storm Uri in Texas in 2021, millions of people lost power for days in freezing temperatures. Many of them later described improvising with whatever they had in the kitchen. The families who had foil, tape, and basic materials managed to create barriers, cook minimal meals, and maintain some level of function. The ones who had nothing were entirely dependent on waiting. A standard box of aluminum foil costs about $3. A heavy-duty roll costs $5 or $6. Keep 2 extras in a drawer. It takes up almost no space and has no expiration date. But the mistake most beginners make is not having enough of it. One small box disappears fast when you are actually using it every meal. And speaking of meals, the next item solves a problem that most people do not realize they have until they are staring at a fully stocked pantry and cannot actually cook anything in it. Number 9 is a manual can opener. This sounds almost too simple. And that is exactly why millions of homes do not have one that works. Think about how many cans of food the average American home contains right now. Beans, vegetables, soups, fish, fruit, tomatoes. The USDA estimates that canned goods are present in virtually every American household. And yet, in a power outage, a surprising number of people discover that their can opener is electric, or that the manual one they own is rusted, broken, or missing entirely. During Hurricane Katrina in 2005, relief workers reported that one of the most requested items in the days following the storm was not water, not medicine, not blankets. It was can openers. People had food. They could not open it. A good manual can opener costs between $5 and $15. It has no batteries, no cords, No moving parts that require electricity. It is one of the most important tools in an emergency pantry. And yet, it is treated like an afterthought. Here is a detail worth knowing. Not all manual can openers are equal. The cheap ones with thin blades and flimsy handles break under sustained use. If you are opening multiple cans per day for 3 to 5 days, you want a heavy-duty model with a smooth gear mechanism and a comfortable grip. Keep one in your emergency supplies and one in your regular kitchen drawer. Do not rely on a single point of failure for something this basic. But opening food is only useful if you have the right food to open. And that leads to something more important than most people realize. Number 8 is white rice. Not because it is exciting, because of what it represents at the intersection of calories, shelf life, cost, and versatility. White rice, properly stored in an airtight container or sealed mylar bag, can last between 25 and 30 years. That is not a typo. 30 years. The reason white rice lasts so much longer than brown rice is because the outer bran layer, which contains oils that go rancid, has been removed. What remains is pure starch that, when kept away from moisture, oxygen, and pests, stays edible for decades. A 50-pound bag of white rice costs roughly $20 to $30 at a wholesale club. That amount of rice contains approximately 80,000 calories. To put that in perspective, the average adult needs about 2,000 calories per day. A single 50-pound bag of rice provides one person with approximately 40 days of caloric foundation. For a family of 4, it provides 10 days. And that is without adding anything else to the meal. During the COVID-19 pandemic in March 2020, rice was one of the first items to disappear from grocery store shelves across the country. In many areas, stores were completely out of rice for 2 to 3 weeks. People who had stored even a modest supply at home felt something specific in that moment. Not superiority. Relief. The mistake most beginners make with rice is storing it incorrectly. Rice stored in its original paper bag in a cabinet will attract pests and absorb moisture. The right way is to transfer it to food-grade airtight containers or sealed mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. Then store it in a cool, dark location. A basement shelf is ideal. A garage in Texas in August is not. Rice is the foundation. But a foundation needs something to build on. And the next item is the most overlooked high-protein option in American emergency storage. Number 7 is canned fish. Specifically, tuna, sardines, salmon, and mackerel. And if you just made a face, that reaction is exactly the problem. Protein is the nutrient that keeps people physically and mentally functional during stress. It maintains muscle, supports immune function, and helps regulate mood. Carbohydrates give energy. Protein keeps the body working under pressure. In a 3 to 5 day power outage, the families eating only rice and crackers will feel it. Foggy thinking, fatigue, irritability. While the families who incorporated protein into their stores will function considerably better. Canned tuna has been a staple of American emergency food storage since World War II, when the U.S. government included it in civilian crisis preparedness guides. A can of tuna contains around 25 grams of protein, costs about $1 to $2, and has a shelf life of 3 to 5 years. Sardines, which many Americans overlook, are nutritionally superior. They contain omega-3 fatty acids, calcium from the softened bones, and vitamin D, and they often cost less than $1 per can. Here is the cultural fact worth knowing. In Portugal, Spain, and Japan, countries with deep seafood traditions, canned fish is not considered a survival food. It is considered normal pantry food. People rotate through it the same way Americans rotate through canned soup. The stigma around it in the United States is almost entirely aesthetic, and it costs families real nutritional resilience. Store at least 10 to 15 cans of mixed canned fish per person. Rotate them annually. Use the oldest ones first and replace them. This is called the FIFO method. First in, first out. and it is the single most important habit in long-term food storage. But all of that food means nothing without the ability to make it edible. And the next item is where most families have a gap they do not even know exists. Number 6 is a portable camp stove with extra fuel. Not a grill, although that helps. A small, compact camp stove designed specifically for off-grid cooking. The assumption most people make is that they will find a way to cook. Maybe they will use the grill. Maybe they will build a fire in the backyard. But grills require charcoal or propane in quantities most families do not stock. Open fires in suburban areas are restricted by local ordinances in many cities and are dangerous without proper fire management skills. And in an apartment or urban setting, neither option is realistic. A propane camp stove, the kind with 2 burners that folds into a carrying case, costs between $30 and $60. A standard propane canister costs $3 to $4 and provides roughly 1 hour of continuous cooking per canister. For a family of 4, cooking 3 times a day for 5 days, you need roughly 15 canisters to be safe. That is $45 to $60 in fuel. Total investment, under $120 to have reliable cooking capability for a week without electricity. During the 2003 Northeast Blackout, the largest in North American history at the time, affecting 55 million people across 8 states and Canada, many families went days without hot meals, simply because they had no off-grid cooking method. Hot food during a crisis is not a luxury. Food safety experts note that certain foods must be heated to specific temperatures to be safe to eat after potential temperature exposure. And the ability to boil water is critical for both cooking and sanitation. The mistake here is buying the stove and forgetting the fuel. Or buying the fuel and not knowing how to use the stove safely indoors, which you should not do without proper ventilation, as propane combustion produces carbon monoxide, outdoors only, or in a well-ventilated garage with the door open. That is a non-negotiable safety rule. And while we are talking about what you cannot see, let's talk about what you cannot breathe if things go wrong. Because the next item on this list has saved lives in a very specific and preventable way. Number 5 is a battery-powered carbon monoxide detector. And the reason this is in the top 5 is because of what people do during power outages that kills them. Every year in the United States, carbon monoxide poisoning kills approximately 400 people and sends more than 20,000 to emergency rooms. The spike in those numbers almost always follows major power outages and winter storms. Because when the power goes out, people bring generators indoors. They run gas-powered equipment in garages with the doors closed. They use propane heaters in sealed rooms. They burn charcoal grills inside their homes for heat. Carbon monoxide is colorless and odorless. You cannot smell it, see it, or taste it. By the time most people realize something is wrong, cognitive impairment has already begun. Confusion, dizziness, and loss of consciousness follow quickly. And in many cases, particularly for children and elderly family members who sleep through the early stages, the outcome is fatal. After Hurricane Sandy in 2012, carbon monoxide poisoning was responsible for multiple deaths across New Jersey and New York, not from the storm itself, but from generators and improper heating sources used in the days that followed. FEMA has since made carbon monoxide detector distribution a standard part of disaster recovery efforts. A battery-powered carbon monoxide detector costs between $20 and $40. It requires no electricity to operate. It gives you the one thing that matters in a CO situation: time to get out of the building. Store extra batteries with it. Test it regularly. And know the rule: if it goes off, do not investigate. Leave immediately and call 911 from outside. This is the item that people almost never think about when they think about power outage preparedness. And it is possibly the one that matters most for immediate safety. Which is why what comes next may surprise you with how simple it is. Number 4 is cash. Physical, paper cash, small bills. And the reason this lands in the top 4 is because of how completely invisible this vulnerability is to most modern American families. In 2023, the Federal Reserve reported that fewer than 20% of transactions in the United States were made with cash. The country has gone nearly entirely digital. Most people carry no cash at all, or perhaps a few dollars for tips. Their finances exist entirely as numbers on a screen, accessible through a phone or a card connected to functioning network infrastructure. Now, remove the power. Remove the internet. Remove the network that connects payment terminals to banking systems. When the power grid goes down in a significant outage, electronic payment systems fail almost immediately. Gas stations cannot process card payments. Most grocery stores, pharmacies, and hardware stores go to cash only or close entirely. ATMs, which require electricity and network connectivity, stop working, and the money you have in your account becomes completely inaccessible. Not because it is gone, but because the system that provides access to it is down. During the 2003 Northeast Blackout, residents of New York City described long lines at the few businesses that remained open and could accept cash. People who had no physical money on hand were simply unable to purchase anything, including water, ice, and food, for the duration of the outage. The recommendation from financial preparedness experts is to keep between $300 and $500 in small bills, 5s, 10s, 20s, in a secure location at home. Not in a car, not in a wallet you carry daily, but in a dedicated emergency supply stored with your other preparedness items. Small bills matter because vendors often cannot make change during a crisis, and a 20 may be the only denomination they can work with. This is not about distrust of banks. It is about the simple reality that access to your money requires a functioning technological infrastructure, and that infrastructure is not always available when you need it most. But money only helps if you can stay informed about what is happening. And the next item is one that an entire generation has completely forgotten about. Number 3 is a hand crank or battery-powered emergency weather radio. And the reason this lands in the top 3 is because of what it gives you that no other device can in a sustained outage. Official, reliable information. Your smartphone will last between 12 and 36 hours depending on battery level and usage. Once it dies, without a way to recharge it, you lose access to news, emergency alerts, weather updates, government communications, and every form of digital information. You are effectively blind to what is happening outside your immediate neighborhood. No AA weather radio. The national network of radio stations operated by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration broadcasts 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and continues to transmit during disasters when cell towers and internet infrastructure are compromised. It is specifically designed to function when other communication systems fail. Emergency responders, hospitals, and government agencies have used it as a primary information source for decades. During Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico in 2017, the island lost nearly all cell service and internet connectivity for weeks. Battery-powered and hand-crank radios became the primary source of information for many communities. People were using devices that had not been popular since the 1980s. And those devices were the ones connecting them to critical updates about water distribution, medical support, and government assistance. A quality hand-crank emergency radio that also receives no-way broadcasts costs between $25 and $60. Many models include a built-in LED flashlight, a solar charging panel, and a USB port for charging small devices. Store it with fresh batteries and know which NOAA frequency covers your region before an emergency happens, not during. Information is power, and in a sustained crisis, knowing what is actually happening allows you to make rational decisions instead of reacting to rumors and fear. That distinction between informed response and panic response is one of the most significant factors in how families survive difficult periods. And now, we are at the final 2. And I want you to pay close attention, because these are not the items that get talked about in prepper forums and survival lists. These are the items that touch something deeper than calories or tools. Number 2 is prescription medication and a comprehensive first aid kit. And the reason this is number 2 is because it represents the intersection of the most common emergencies and the least prepared aspect of almost every American household. Let's start with prescription medication. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that approximately 60% of American adults take at least one prescription medication. Many of those medications are taken daily: blood pressure medications, diabetes insulin, thyroid hormones, antidepressants, seizure medications, anticoagulants. These are not optional medications. They are the difference between stability and medical emergency for the people who depend on them. Most people maintain a supply of prescription medication that lasts until their next refill, which means they typically have between 3 and 7 days of medication on hand at any given moment. In a sustained power outage where pharmacies are closed, roads are impassable, or supply chains are disrupted, 3 to 7 days can become a crisis window very quickly. After Hurricane Florence hit the Carolinas in 2018, pharmacies in affected areas were closed for days. Dialysis centers lost power. People on insulin lost refrigeration for their medication. The secondary health crisis that followed a natural disaster, driven almost entirely by medication disruption, affected thousands of people who had survived the initial event. The preparedness recommendation is to maintain a 30-day supply of critical prescription medications whenever possible. Talk to your doctor about emergency supply options. Many states have passed legislation allowing emergency refills during declared disasters. Keep a written list of every medication, dose, prescribing doctor and pharmacy stored in a waterproof container with your emergency supplies. And never assume you will be able to get what you need from a pharmacy during or immediately after a crisis. The first aid kit component is equally important, but for different reasons. In a power outage, emergency services are strained. Response times increase. Minor injuries, cuts from working in the dark, burns from cooking over open flame, falls caused by unfamiliar conditions, become more common precisely when professional medical help is harder to access. A comprehensive first aid kit should include wound cleaning supplies, adhesive bandages in multiple sizes, sterile gauze and medical tape, antiseptic wipes and antiseptic cream, burn treatment supplies, over-the-counter pain relievers in multiple formulations, anti-diarrheal medication, antihistamines, a digital thermometer, and a basic first aid manual printed on paper, not saved as a PDF on your phone. Printed on paper. Organize your kit so that you can find what you need in the dark, under stress, without reading labels. Know where the thermometer is. Know where the antiseptic is. Practice opening the kit and locating items without panicking. Because in the moment you need it, calm and organized is the only version of you that will be useful. And now, we are at number 1. And I want to take a moment before I tell you what it is, because the way I tell you matters. Number 1 is water storage and a filtration system. And if you are disappointed because you already knew this was important, that disappointment is the problem. Knowing that water is critical and actually being prepared for a water disruption are two completely different things. And the gap between them is where most families are living right now. The human body can survive approximately 3 weeks without food. It can survive approximately 3 to 5 days without water. And that number drops significantly in heat during physical exertion, or for young children and elderly adults. Water is not the most interesting preparedness topic. It is the most urgent one. FEMA's official recommendation is 1 gallon of water per person per day, for a minimum of 3 days. That number is widely considered a survival minimum, not a comfort standard. That 1 gallon covers drinking and basic sanitation, but not cooking water, cleaning water, bathing water, or water for pets. A more realistic number for actual livable conditions is 3 to 5 gallons per person per day. Here is what most people do not think about. Municipal water systems depend on electricity. Pumping stations, treatment facilities, and pressurization systems all require power. When a major outage affects an area, water pressure in homes frequently drops within 24 to 48 hours. In some situations, utilities issue boil water advisories, which requires, of course, a way to boil water without electricity. During Winter Storm Uri in Texas in February 2021, millions of people lost not just electricity, but water simultaneously. Pipes froze and burst. Water treatment plants lost power. Millions of people in a state that rarely prepares for winter conditions found themselves without heat and without running water for days, some for over a week. People were melting snow in pots. People were waiting in lines for FEMA water distribution trucks. People who lived in modern homes in major American cities were collecting water in bathtubs and buckets. And in the chaos, contamination became a real concern because not everyone had a way to treat collected water. A quality water filtration system, specifically a gravity-fed filter like the Berkey or similar brand, can filter and purify water from virtually any freshwater source. Rivers, rain collection, even cloudy or murky water. It requires no electricity, no chemicals, and no pressure. It works on gravity alone. A family-size unit costs between $250 and $350 and will filter up to 6,000 gallons of water before requiring filter replacement. That is years of emergency filtration capacity for a one-time investment. For water storage, food-grade water storage containers are available in sizes ranging from 5 gallons to 55 gallons. They are made from BPA-free plastic designed specifically for long-term water storage. A 5-gallon container costs about $10. Fill them, seal them, store them in a cool, dark location, and rotate the water every 6 to 12 months. But here is the part of the water conversation that no one tells you about until it is too late. The psychological weight of being without water is unlike being without any other supply. Food scarcity produces anxiety. Water scarcity produces a specific kind of fear that affects judgment, decision-making, and family dynamics in ways that are hard to describe until you have experienced it. The families who have water stored, who can wake up during a crisis and pour a glass of clean water without drama, experience that moment as something close to calm. And calm is what allows rational decisions. And rational decisions are what protect families. There is a reason that water is number one. Not because it is the most exotic item, not because it is the most technical, but because without it, nothing else on this list matters. And because it is the item that most American families have either not stored at all or severely understored. So here is where we are. We started this video with 10 items. A manual can opener and aluminum foil that cost less than $10 combined. Rice that costs less than $30 for a month's worth of calories for one person. Canned fish that costs under $2 per can. A camp stove that costs less than a tank of gas. A carbon monoxide detector that costs less than a dinner out. Cash that requires no purchase at all. An emergency radio that costs less than a streaming subscription for a year. A first aid kit and medication supply that can be assembled over the course of a normal month of shopping. And water, the most abundant and most overlooked supply in almost every American home. None of this is extreme. None of this requires a bunker or a radical lifestyle change or a belief in any specific future event. It requires only one thing that is harder than all of it combined: doing it before you need it. Because here is the truth that this entire video has been building toward. The families who were calm during Winter Storm Uri had prepared before the storm arrived. The families who were calm during Hurricane Sandy had prepared before the season started. The families who navigated the early weeks of the COVID pandemic without panic had quietly built their supplies during the years when nothing was happening. And in every single case, the thing they felt when everyone else was in a panic was not superiority. It was relief. It was the quiet satisfaction of having given their families options when options were hard to find. Preparedness is not about fear. It is about the opposite of fear. It is the decision to face uncertainty from a position of calm instead of desperation. It is choosing to be the person in the family who has an answer when someone asks, "What do we do now?" It is the small, unglamorous, deeply practical act of buying an extra bag of rice, filling a water container, putting cash in a drawer, and then sleeping better because you did. The best time to prepare was 5 years ago. The second best time is before the next weather report makes everyone else think of it simultaneously and empties the shelves by noon. And if the items that disappear first during a power outage surprised you, wait until we talk about what happens in the first 6 hours of a major winter storm when the grocery stores still show as open on your phone. But the parking lot tells a very different story. That is the next conversation. And it starts where this one ends.